All right, y'all. So I'm going to do a video series on Mississippi history. Well, before before we really get started, so before Mississippi became a territory, which the Mississippi Territory at this time was from the 31st parallel north to the 35th parallel from the Mississippi River on the west and bordered on the east by the state of Georgia. Before that happened, it was called the Yazoo lands. The Yazoo lands were a very controversial land swindle in which a lot of people in the state of Georgia or colony of Georgia, because I don't think Georgia actually became a state until 1788. But in the colony and later state of Georgia, they were the legislature was given land in what was known as the Yazoo territory. Basically, they're friends. They were given these large land tracts. Well, unfortunately, a lot of people were highly upset because, you know, I'm going to give it to my friends, but common guys, hey, you ain't getting nothing. And this is very rich farmland, very rich soil. Um, you can grow just about anything you put in the ground is going to come back up in the state of Mississippi, especially in central and northern of the present states of Mississippi and Alabama, which make up the tract. Um, Down here on the Gulf Coast, there was a whole nother deal going on, and I'll get into that in a different video. But back then, they were basically selling these plots for nothing. Um, Back then, land was very abundant, and it wasn't the urban sprawl that this country has become today. Um, the largest cities in this country were on the eastern seaboard, and the wilderness was just really a couple of hundred miles inland. Well, back then, Mississippi was basically as about as populated as Alaska is today. I mean, it was wilderness. It was almost unexplored. A lot of Native Americans, Chickasaw, Choctaw, and they also had claims to the land. Well, people in Georgia who sent their elected officials to the state capitol didn't particularly care for what they were seeing happen. And the federal government wound up stepping in and stopped it. But at one time, um, Georgia extended all through Mississippi. The entire Mississippi territory was claimed by the state of Georgia. And that's how Mississippi got its start, is in controversy. Um, a lot of states were territories for very short periods of time. The Mississippi Territory lasted from 1798 until 1817, when the government finally figured out a way to end the land swindling deal. Yazoo, a lot of people were not happy. It was basically a decision by the government that made everybody unhappy. The government took the Yazoo lands and they basically settled out for $5 million and said, "Okay, you get this much, you get this much, you get this much. Now shut up and go away." Back then, there was also a land lottery, and also back then, because this country was young and broke and poor, and by by the time the Revolutionary War ended, we were heavily indebted to France for their help. The way to pay a Revolutionary War veteran's pension was to give them homesteads. Now, my family, at the time of the Revolutionary War, had moved from Virginia to the state of Georgia. Shortly after the Revolutionary War, they came west and landed in what is now present day Mississippi. From what I can tell, the time they landed here was right about the time that Georgia's land fiasco with the Yazoo lands was finally being settled. And my family settled eventually around what is now known as Lawrence County, Mississippi, or Monticello, Mississippi. But this video is going to be on some of the early counties. Georgia actually had a county in Mississippi called Bourbon County, and that's what it was called. Bourbon County covered basically from Natchez to Yazoo City, which is a big area. I mean, that's like, I don't know, probably 15 counties in Mississippi right now. It went up north of Vicksburg, north of Jackson. It went up to about Yazoo City, Belzoni, that area. So it was a really large area, but sparsely populated, which is why they can get away with having only one county. I mean, it would take you a couple hours from drive to from one end to the other of Bourbon County, the area of Bourbon County as it is today. And also keep in mind, folks, Natchez, Mississippi is a very historical city and was also a very important port on the Mississippi River for importation of goods coming up from the Gulf of Mexico going inland. Also, keeping in mind that at this particular time, west of the Mississippi River was French Louisiana. This is, before the purchase, the Louisiana Purchase of 1803. By this time, they had had a major port there for about 70, 80 years, and it was gateway basically into French Louisiana. So Natchez being what it wasn't the it wasn't as grand of a place as it would become a few decades later in the 1820s, 1830s, 1840s, and 1850s. But it was still an important place, and Georgia wanted it because they knew that, of course, back then, if they had land all the way to the Mississippi River, the economy of the state of Georgia, bordered on the east by the Atlantic Ocean and Savannah, and bordered on the west by the Mississippi River, would have made Georgia the most prosperous colony, then later state in North America. My theory, I don't have historical fact to back up their state of mind, but that would be my theory, knowing how rich Mississippi is and knowing how rich Mississippi was back then and what it had become. Anyway, like I said, the land deals fell through, and that opened the door for the creation of the Mississippi Territory, which encompassed all of present day Mississippi north of the 31st parallel, and all of the state of Alabama north of the 31st parallel, all the way up to the present Tennessee border. So, if you look into history and you wonder why people went west, that was the wild, wild west as everybody was going to. This also later led to the Trail of Tears and the Native Americans being removed from Mississippi and Alabama in the 1830s, being moved out to Indian Territory, or what would later become the state of Oklahoma. More on what led to Mississippi becoming a state and what made Mississippi in later videos. Thank you for watching.